So, just for a little background information, I was a small, blonde 12-year-old girl living in a relatively small town in Australia, and I had just gotten my period for the first time. My mum had asked me to walk into town to buy some things for a camp I was going to a few days later, and I, feeling like the independent 12-year-old, excitedly said yes. I'd never been down the street by myself before. It was only about a 20-minute walk into town, and halfway there I decided I should probably go to the toilet, because I could feel that something was leaking. I got up to a small block that has toilets in them. The block used to be an old bus stop, so there's a room inside where people wait, and then there's the female bathroom and the male bathroom. It was very run down. I was walking up to the block when I saw an old man just standing there in the main room, looking out of the window, staring directly at me. I literally stood there for 10 seconds, wondering if I should go inside or not. I decided to assume he was just in there waiting for his wife to come out of the toilet or something. I really didn't want to get down the street and find out that I had leaked. That would have been really embarrassing. So I walk into the block and try not to look at the man, but I can feel his eyes on me. When I realised that nobody else was in the bathroom, I started to panic a little, but then thought maybe he was waiting for a friend to come out of the male bathroom. So I'm in the cubicle, doing my own little thing, when I hear the door open. I feel relaxed thinking now I'm at least not alone. The person walking stops directly in front of my cubicle, and I see in the crack it's the same man, just staring through the crack at me. I honestly thought I was going to die at that point. There was nothing I could do, as I had no phone with me. It felt like I was sitting there for about 5 minutes, just waiting for him to make a move, when I hear some loud chatter. It was a family walking towards the block. The man is immediately out of his trance and books it out of there. I wait in my cubicle until I hear a woman and her daughter come in. I came out of the cubicle, still in shock, and tell her what happened. She brought me outside to where her husband was, and they called the police. They were very lovely about it all, and waited there with me. They had seen the man walk out of the actual block relatively calm. There wasn't really anything the police could do, as he didn't actually harm me. They took a statement, but there was a warning in the newspaper the next day letting parents know about the incident, and that they and their children should take extra care. Fast forward about 2 weeks later. I was home from camp and I had pretty much pushed whatever happened to me to the back of my mind. I was sitting in the room with my parents, while they were watching the news, when the man's face popped up on the screen. I had a panic attack when his face came up, and my older brother took me outside. My parents ended up telling me the story in less detail, but this man had gone to another city and raped and killed a little girl around the same age as me. He was caught though, as this man was obviously on some kind of drug and just waited around staring at the girl. I don't know anything else about him, but I know that he's still in jail, probably rotting away. I've been to therapy since and I feel okay, but sometimes I wonder where that girl would be if I'd have been the one that died. In 1975, my dad was 11 years old and living in Leeds, England, with his mother and stepfather. And for some pocket money, he'd go and do a paper round every morning, extremely early. He left the house in the dark as usual and went to collect the papers, setting off to take his usual route through some playing fields, essentially a public park but not a very well kept one. But this morning was a particularly dark and gloomy one, and as he approached the cut-through he usually took, there seemed to be something off about it, so much so that it genuinely freaked him out, just to be there. He decided to take his time and go the long way around, just to avoid the park, and thought nothing of it for the rest of the morning. When he got to school after his paper round, everyone was freaked out and in quite a state, and upon asking his friends what was going on, they told him that a woman had been murdered with a hammer and stabbed in the neck earlier that morning in the same playing fields that he decided not to go through, and on the same pathway too. Probably just a major coincidence, but a very lucky one at that, because the time he was on his round was the apparent time the crime took place. This turned out to be the first of 13 gruesome murders committed by the notorious Peter Sutcliffe, aka the Yorkshire Ripper. This happened in 2008, when I was 16 or 17. Back then I went to school in the nearest town, a pretty small city in the south of Sweden. I'm telling you this because there's really not much to see here, so we don't get many tourists, especially not in the winter, which is when this took place. In one of the malls not far from my school, there's a cafe on the second floor, where me and some classmates would hang out while waiting for the bus home. The rest of the mall consists of different shops, and then there's the big underground car park. Me and 3 other girls are sitting in the cafe, chatting and laughing, when a blonde woman in her 30s comes up to our table and asks if she may sit down. I nod, surprised both that she's speaking French, and that she wants to sit with us when there's plenty of other unoccupied tables. As I said before, we don't get a lot of tourists here, and the few that we get usually speak English, or have a guide or someone with them that does. She, on the other hand, seems to be completely on her own, except for a small baby she's holding wrapped in a blanket. I remember feeling a bit sorry for her. It can't be easy being alone and not being able to make yourself understood, but I only knew a few phrases in French, since I only studied it for less than half a year. After a few failed attempts to speak English with her, we have to give up and just smile politely now and then. After a while I noticed something weird. She's not eating or drinking anything. At first I thought she was just waiting for her order, but there's almost no other customers, and we've been sitting there for like 15 minutes. She's sitting on the opposite side of the table from me, fiddling with her cell phone. Texting, I assume, although she's holding it at a weird angle. The camera lens is facing me pretty much all the time. The longer I look, the more convinced I am that she's taking pictures of me. A bit uncomfortable, I ask my friends if they have finished their coffee so we can leave, and we start to collect our things. The woman's on her phone now, speaking rapid French with someone in a low voice. As I'm passing her to leave, she also gets up and says something, almost pleading like when you're asking someone for a favour. Although I can't understand what she's saying, it's pretty obvious that she wants me to follow her somewhere. And then I remember the underground car park. It makes sense that she doesn't have a stroller if she came by car, so I point at the exit door downstairs, which she should have been able to see by herself since it's in clear view. She looks at me, almost disappointed, maybe even annoyed, but she doesn't persist, so I follow my friends down the escalator. Then I see it. When the woman puts her cell phone between her shoulder and her cheek to reach something in her pocket, the blanket that the unusually quiet baby is wrapped inside slides down a bit and exposes a doll. Both security and police were contacted, but by then she was already gone. All that was left was the security camera's grainy footage of her and the doll, which was later found in the car park. This happened about a month ago, and is definitely creepy encounter material. The night this happened, I'd been at a friend's loft, watching an old scary movie, The Fog. We started the movie late, and I fell asleep midway through. I was woken by a thunderstorm around 2:30 AM, and that was my exit. On the way home I stopped for gas. The service station itself was closed, with the pumps being open for anyone paying by card. I live in a large but spread out city, and the gas station I was at was just outside of the arts district, which is like a ghost town late at night. While filling up, I noticed an iPhone laying on the ground at the next pump. With no one around for miles and being the snoop that I can be, I decided to pick up the phone and take it with me for further inspection. I figured someone would call the phone and I'd be able to locate the owner that way, and if not, then I'd return it to the gas station the next day when there'd be an attendant on duty. While driving home, I started snooping through the phone. Surprisingly, the phone was almost fully charged and there was no passcode set. I thought it was strange that the phone wasn't locked, but not strange enough to give it more than a second thought. Of course, I went straight to the photos. What I found was not what I expected. I think there were around 50 pictures on the phone. All of the pictures, with the exception of 2, were candid pictures of a young guy around my age in various locations, with at least 10 to 15 of those pictures being of him apparently working at a Target, and maybe 5 of the photos being taken in the arts district where I'd just come from. The 2 pictures that were not of this guy were selfies of a man whose face was slightly disfigured by what appeared to be burns. They weren't terrible burns, but they definitely made the guy look scary, and seeing him staring back at me in those pictures really spooked me. Weirder still, the selfies had clearly been taken inside of a Target, and there was a young guy in the background of the picture, who I think was the same guy in all the other pictures. Realizing I'd stumbled onto something weird, I closed the Photos app, and as soon as I did that, the phone locked, and a message appeared that said, "I know you have my phone, and I know where you are. I'm coming for my phone." I'd completely forgotten about Find My iPhone until that moment. I quickly realized that the owner of the phone had remotely activated Find My iPhone and was probably tracking me in real time. I thought about taking the phone back to the gas station and dropping it where I found it, but the message along with the photos got the best of me, and I started getting paranoid. I had the crazy idea in my head that maybe the owner of the phone had somehow activated the phone's camera and could see me. I'll be honest, I was a little stoned at the time. Fearing the apparent burn victim and stalker who the phone belonged to, I did what any normal and well-adjusted adult would do. I pulled over, smashed the phone, and ditched it in a Ripple Glass recycling can on the opposite side of town. My bad, but maybe this act of property destruction saved some poor guy from his stalker? I hope so. This happened back at uni with my then girlfriend, now wife, Sam. Sam worked at a local eatery known for being frequented by long-haul truckers. Usually you wouldn't know repeat customers, as they'd just be on their way through, but one guy always caught her off guard. He was a Russian guy that called himself Sergey. Any time he saw her, he would wait for it to be her turn to serve, and even let others go ahead of him to ensure when he was seated, it would be in her section. He seemed nice enough, but he'd always touch her hand when she placed the check and say something in Russian that her memory couldn't properly repeat for me to attempt to translate. She complained to management, but they brushed it off as, "Oh, he's just foreign and it's their custom. Plus he tips really well and pays cash, so you shouldn't complain." After a few months she learned his weekly route, and said her class schedule changed, so she wouldn't work when he'd be there. This worked for all of 1 week, then suddenly his route schedule changed. Then he got more handsy, hugging when he left and staying until her shift ended. He'd continually order some small side dish or another so management wouldn't kick his ass out. At this point I started spending the night at her place more often than not, and luckily I was there on the night that Sergey showed up. Sam came home that night and told me that he had offered to escort her to the idiot because the roads were icy and dangerous. Now my best guess at that is kuda idiosh, which means where you are going. Strange, he didn't say home or school or even wherever, but like he had a destination in mind. About 3 AM, we're awoken by the sound of someone trying to open the door. Luckily her apartment had one of those sliding chain locks, and the door slams against the chain bracket. At this point I'm reaching under the bed for Sam's rifle, hoping she kept it loaded. Irresponsible, yes, but hey, this was a time I'd hoped she'd been lax. It wasn't loaded, but I knew where the 8mm rounds were. I threw a few in and headed for the door. I moved to the other side of the room. Sam had a knife, and was in the hall behind the door calling 911. The door then slowly opened to where the chain was taut, and someone slid a coat hanger around to try and undo the lock. At this point, thinking it was Sergey, I said in my best broken Russian, "O меня Mauser, okoroviet umret." Translation, I have a Mauser. Open, die. I said this in my most threatening yet terrified voice. Imagine a small child trying to be brave. A flashlight shone through the door, temporarily blinding me, before clicking off, and we heard footsteps running down the hall. The police showed up about 10 minutes later and took our statements, but couldn't do much else. We had no good view of the would-be intruder and no proof of who it was. Sam quit her job the next day and basically moved into my place. We may never know who it was, and to whomever it was, let's not meet. But if we do, my offer stands. Hi guys, thanks so much for listening and for all the positive response so far. If you'd like to hear more, you can follow the links on the screen. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe to help support the channel further. If you want, you can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter. The links are in the description, as is my email address, and you can send me your own scary stories too if you want. So until my next video on Friday guys, take care, and remember, the best things happen in the dark.